Good morning, our viewers. Welcome to the monthly distinguished lecture of the Council for Strategic Affairs. Today is Saturday, March 29, 2025, and we have a distinguished lecture. Our speaker is Ms. Bindu Devkinath Maharaj, and those of you who registered probably saw this flyer. The topic is Guyana-Venezuela conflict. Council for Strategic Affairs has been monitoring this issue for a while, and a year and a half ago we had a roundtable discussion on the same topic. And obviously the problems have not disappeared, but this have actually geopolitical significance for whole of South Americas. Before we actually start, a little bit of introduction to Council for Strategic Affairs. Council imparts education in the field of international relations. CSA fosters discussion, dialogue, and debate on geopolitical issues. We encourage strategic studies in general to raise the level of awareness. We encourage publication of articles on geopolitics. The Council condemns terrorism in all its forms worldwide. No ifs and buts. CSA aims to contribute towards world peace and prosperity. We are registered as a 501c3 organization with the IRS in United States. Those of our viewers who are based in United States, we request them to donate and support the CSA. The link is here. Link is also on our website. So we usually have a monthly roundtable discussion on Saturday of each month at 10 a.m. Eastern Daytime, and a monthly guest lecture by a domain expert on fourth Saturday of each month at the same time, like we are having today. We also have a feature called one-on-one interview, that is strategically speaking with Dr. Adityanji. The Council organizes symposia, meetings, and conferences. We have a summer internship program for college students, and we have a fellowship training program in strategic studies. And I'm very happy to say that currently we have 2 training fellows. One of them is Khushi Mishra, and second of them is Harsh Sinha. Again, we are registered as a 501c3 organization. Please donate and support to CSA. And of course, you will be seeing our distinguished speaker. That is a picture, but she'll be appearing live soon. Bindu Maharaj has multiple credentials. She initially did a Bachelor of Science in Geography and then did Bachelor of Arts in Visual Arts. She also has a diploma in Social Psychology and Personality, and then had a master's degree in creative writing. She has been a teacher and educator at secondary level for last 29 years in the country of Trinidad and Tobago. So she is very familiar with the South American as well as CARICOM, Caribbean politics. She was previously moderator of the ICC Zoom program directed by Dr. Kumar Mahabir. She has been a panelist and presenter in multiple Indo-diasporic discussions. She is a writer who explores the complexities of the space occupied by East Indians in post-indentureship and post-independence Caribbean countries faced with matters of race, religion, gender, and politics. And I'm very happy to say that since this topic involves 2 countries, Guyana and Venezuela, she does not belong to either of them. She belongs to Trinidad and Tobago, so she can give a very objective point of view on this particular ongoing conflict and almost Cold War. And currently, this Cold War might become hot war because of this particular person who is upping the ante. So you have this, popular media descriptions and all. I personally will not like to speak on the subject. I won't even introduce it because I'll leave it to our distinguished speakers. So I have a couple of slides that I'm not going to talk about, but I'll show you some pictures. So this is Guyana with its capital Georgetown. Again, this is Guyana, and these are the blocks where oil exploration is happening. Again, a political map of Guyana. And this is Guyana with its province Essequibo, on which Venezuela is laying a claim. So again, map of Guyana surrounded by Suriname, on other side Brazil and then Venezuela. And this is the territory of Essequibo that Venezuela wants to control because of the oil and minerals. And this is the map of Venezuela in relation to Guyana. So our viewers will have some geographical point of reference. A little bit of housekeeping rules. I would expect all our viewers to mute themselves to avoid noise interference. Please change your cell phone to vibration mode. Please do not interrupt our distinguished speaker when she is speaking. Only those members of the audience who identify themselves openly will be allowed to ask questions, so no anonymous questioners. All the questions are moderated through the chat. Please be very precise and specific in asking a question. Don't write a lengthy monologue under the garb of a question. And of course, this program is being recorded. It's also being live streamed on YouTube channel. It will be available on our website as well as on YouTube channel as an educational resource. And lastly, again, Council for Strategic Affairs is registered as a 501c3 non-profit organization with the Internal Revenue Service in the United States. My request to our viewers from United States is to please donate, financially support the Council for Strategic Affairs. You can donate by PayPal, by TrueKarma links on the website, or you can mail a check to Council for Strategic Affairs. Without further ado, I'm going to invite our distinguished speaker, Ms. Bindu Devakinath Maharaj. Ma'am, the platform is yours. Kindly unmute yourself. Currently, you are muted. So please unmute yourself and let's hear.
Okay, so good night, good afternoon, and to some of us, good morning over here. Thank you, Dr. Adityanji, for reaching out to me to do this lecture. I would say it's very lovely to be part of a discussion that is being had by the Indian diaspora about something that really is impactful. So I'll start off by firstly the teacher and me. So what you would have done there with your slides, that's excellent because I'm seeing some double up of the maps that I would have as well. And the teacher and me always likes to know that there's a context for everything, not just jumping into a particular topic. So, me being from the Caribbean, where I live in Trinidad and Tobago, it's just above both Venezuela and Guyana. We are not part of the same region geographically, as you would say, because Trinidad is part of the Caribbean, while Guyana falls within the South American continent, together with Venezuela. But we are very much impacted, and we are quite aware of what is happening and the pending impacts it's going to have, everything that's happening now, and that would have happened previously, how it's going to impact on us in the Caribbean. So I'll start firstly by sharing my some slides with you all. So let me just open this up. All right. Okay, so the Guyana-Venezuela conflict. I think it's imperative that we understand their histories because their histories would have created the avenues and in some cases the origins to what is happening now. And you would see from the discussion, you would see that um, it's like a cycle, it's never ending. Some things are happening and re-emerging after 100 years, 200 years. So let's get started here. So this is the Central America and the Caribbean. So over here you would have Guyana, here you'll have Venezuela, and just this little dot there, that's Trinidad and Tobago. So you'll see that Venezuela on the eastern border, there's Guyana, and there's also Suriname on Guyana's east. There's the French Guiana, which is also now these three bodies here have been historically governed, and they have a similar history of governance. So this is the general location. So if you look here, this is Central America and the United States here. So we can at least see the proximity of each body in relation to the other. So a bit of history about Guyana. Now, Guyana is located on the northern coast of South America and borders the Atlantic Ocean. Geographically, Guyana is part of the South American mainland. However, it is much more similar to the nearby island nations of the Caribbean, such as Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines, and even Grenada with respect to culture. In fact, Guyana is considered to be a Caribbean country. So even though it's not an island nation located in the Caribbean Sea, Guyana is seen because of the similarity in our histories with slavery and indentureship, and of course, colonization. Now there's so much that can be said, and you would see as I go along, countries that have post-colonial histories, there's so much more in their histories to talk about, given the fact that their governance would have changed as the empires switch. One empire would win and take over, and then there would be a switch again, and so on and so forth. So the history of Guyana began with the Dutch rule. So the annihilation of the indigenous peoples would have led to the Dutch looking to replace their labor force with Africans as slaves. Obviously, with most countries or nations who were colonized after the indigenous peoples were basically annihilated, they looked for a free labor supply, and that would have come primarily from the Africans. So how did the Dutch then get switched? Then there was a transition from the Dutch to the English, right? So in the 18th century, the Dutch encouraged English settlers to develop plantations in the Guyana's territory. And by the latter part of the 1700s, English planters were virtually in command of most of the Guyanas, right? After the Napoleonic Wars, now what's the Napoleonic Wars? So it was a series of conflicts between France under Napoleon and various European powers from 1803 to 1815. So after that, the British took possession of those Western territories as British Guyana. The Dutch then retained control, so it went back now to the Dutch, and which now became Dutch Guyana, and then later Suriname. So the far eastern Guyanas became French Guyana. So you would have noticed in the map that I would have shown earlier, you had Venezuela firstly, then Guyana, then Suriname, then French Guyana. So the Dutch took over once more. Now, after the Napoleonic Wars, Guyana changed hands now with the British, because after the Dutch, the British took over again. And the whole history of Guyana, there was a bewildering frequency of how they shifted from British to French to Dutch for a little bit, then back to the British, then back to the Dutch, then finally settling with British control. And this would have gone on from 1792 to 1815. The British took over in 1796, except for short intervals when Demerara, Berbice, and Essequibo, which in 1831, they were all united as the colony of British Guyana. So those three bodies there would have been united as one body in 1831. In 1834, a small group, so this is where we see the Portuguese coming in now. So in 1834, a small group of Portuguese recruited from the poverty-stricken Portuguese-owned island of Madeira arrived in Guyana to work on sugar plantations throughout Demerara. Soon after, because by this time, slavery would have been abolished, right? So after that didn't work out with the Portuguese, who would have gone on immediately after their 4-year contract term would have finished, they would have gone on to become some of the business people. And for several decades, they had control of the business sector. They went on to be the business owners and so on. Soon after, between 1838 and 1917, you got indentured laborers coming in or imported from India to various West Indian colonies, Trinidad being one of them, Guyana. We have all through that we talk about all the time in our discussions, right? Jamaica, Barbados, Grenada, St. Vincent. Okay, I'm seeing. So in 1966, British Guyana gained independence finally and was called Guyana in 1966. Now, at that point, there was a series of heads of state. So from 1970 straight down to present, and our present head of state is Dr. Irfaan Ali. And Mr. Irfaan Ali, and he is the one right now trying to mediate, negotiate, navigate this onslaught of and this barrage of things that's coming from President Maduro's way from Venezuela. So this is the area of dispute. So as I would have said, Dr. Adityanji would have shown this. So you have Suriname. So this area here in brown and green is Guyana, present Guyana, right? But the Guyana Essequibo area is the area of contention. It lies within, it lies on the eastern side of Venezuela, western side of Guyana. And this area here is the area that Nicolas Maduro really wants because it's rich in mineral deposit, natural gas, and crude oil. So the Essequibo or the Essequibo region is the center of dispute. A little bit about that now. So in the 1840s, Britain would have unilaterally surveyed the border clashing with Venezuelan claims. There was arbitration in 1899, and it was settled, and the border dispute was settled, and it favored Guyana. However, this is what Maduro is going back to, this arbitration, and he's looking at this and bringing this back as a point of contention that, you know, it was unfair and all of that. So we'll get into that further. So in 1905, there was a demarcation agreement and an established boundary was made after the arbitration would have happened. So that boundary that I would have shown you here in the previous slide here, that would have been solidified and established that that is the boundary. So Guyana's oil. Now, Guyana is a country that is rich in minerals and natural resources. So apart from oil, they have bauxite, they have gold, And they are really, really rich in those things. So some of it would have dwindled in the past, not because it was lost or these resources would have depleted, but simply because exploration of for them had to come to an end because of conflicts and disputes with Suriname on the right hand side and Venezuela on the left hand. So Guyana has been historically sandwiched between these two nations who tried and it continues to try to stake claims on Guyana's reserves. So it began in this whole odyssey began in the 18th century. And in the 1750s, Dutch explorers would have their records that they would have noticed in northern parts of Guyana, in the Quincanal Point in 1970s, that there was pitch. Now, pitch, Trinidad has the largest asphalt lake in the world. However, they sold it out to the Chinese, so we have no ownership of it anymore. So pitch is that whole pitch reserve. It's also part of that whole fossilization process. So when you see pitch, you will see crude oil, you will see natural gas reserves most of the times, right? So in the 1930s, a license was issued to Trinidad Leasehold Companies Limited, where on-land exploration would have happened. However, no exploration was conducted until 1965, allowing for, there was no, you would see as we go along that at certain points, because of stakes being made by these two different nations on both sides of Guyana, because of the conflict, exploration had to come to an end. Now, I don't want to go through too much, but you would see that from 1930, 1935, 1965, there were significant offshore exploration was happening. So now there's not just onshore, but offshore reserves, and that Guyana has a rich wealth of. Again, now these are all different licensing license that would have been given for contracts for periods of exploration and so on. And you would see like there were a number of offshore and onshore projects, but they were all conducted unsuccessfully. So there were attempts, but so you're seeing that yes, Guyana has had these reserves, but because of the lack of success in the exploration, it wasn't really a big deal until further along. So in the 1980s, Guyana began promoting to attract investors for exploration, and it was supported by the World Bank with aims right for exploration, development for both petroleum and gas, and in hopes that reserves would be found. Now, just remember, when these reserves are found, the finances, the income created, or the monies that would be gathered would not just be for Guyana. They would be like ExxonMobil and stuff like that, who they would get benefit from it because they are the companies that are doing the exploration, then the drilling. So in 1994, oil exploration halted due to lack of funding again. 1995, they tried to resuscitate it, and again to attract companies for both onshore and offshore, as you would see throughout here. Now, in June 2000, CGX, which is a company who would have been doing exploration, you'll see here that Suriname would have come out now and try to hinder, and they were successful in hindering that exploration. because this company, CGX, was contracted for the drilling. And because of that, and this is offshore, so this is where they're, so right now, they're between Guyana and Venezuela, that Essequibo region, that is an on-land border that is being fought for. However, it expands offshore as well. And this is the same thing that Suriname was concerned about and wanted to see what they can stake claims in for their personal benefits. Eventually, the aggression between Suriname and Guyana, it continued, but eventually it did get settled. Guyana in 2001, the USGS, they estimated that there were around 15 billion barrels of oil reserves. And based on that, the government of Guyana, they began trying to close off that issue and bring it to some sort of resolution between Suriname. So look, we didn't even reach Venezuela yet, but Guyana is such an integral space that it is a point of contention because of that richness that they have and where they can have revenue, and both parties on both sides want a part of it. So again, this is about different hindrances that occurred. Now, in 2004, On Energy, another company who is connected to CGX, they conducted a survey and they purchased a 1,000,000-acre block. They had an interest, and 100% interest in a block adjacent to the border of Venezuela. They did once again not conduct any exploration because of the maritime border between Guyana and Venezuela. So it's this offshore part now, because those On Energy and CGX, they would have been doing their explorations at this point offshore wise. So 2007, finally, situation settled between Guyana and Suriname. There was a tribunal from the United Nations International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea, where Guyana received a majority of acreage, 33,000 square kilometers, where Suriname got just around 18,000 square kilometers. As soon as that became resolved within the Guyana Basin, bam, the explorations began again. Now, this is where Guyana and Venezuela started to pop up again. So in 2013, Venezuelan Navy interrupted and seized a research vessel conducting work on behalf of Anadarko, another company that does exploration and surveys and testing and so on. Bam. Explorations halted once more. But because of the amount of reserves found previously, not only was Guyana excited about it, Venezuela became excited about it. And the world and investors, they also saw that, oh, okay, there's a benefit for us. We should stay on a bit longer. We shouldn't back off because of all this conflict, So most of them requested extensions so that they can continue their drilling obligations and so on. And so this is an extract from the Harvard International Review. So in 2015, the oil giant ExxonMobil discovered 11 billion barrels of oil off the coast of the small Latin American country. The discovery promises to change Guyana forever, catapulting the country and its people to new heights of power and wealth. Oil already generates US 1 billion in revenues for Guyana and will now produce an estimated 7.5 billion by 2040. By these forecasts, Guyana, the impoverished rainforest covered country of just 800,000 people, will become the fourth largest offshore oil producer in the world. So that's what was said by the Harvard International Review based on that discovery by ExxonMobil. And they would have gone on to say this now about Venezuela. So petroleum has long accounted for more than 75% of Venezuela's top exports, total exports. When oil prices plummeted in the 1980s and 2014, the economy of Venezuela was sent spiraling. By some estimates, hyperinflation reached more than 65,000% in 2019. And actually, that's around this time. This is when Trinidad, we had a lot of people coming into, escaping Venezuela and coming into Trinidad as one, because we're so close. So given the Venezuelans' economy dependence on oil, if the government ever used up its oil, an economy would be a crater, right? So this is seeing the ill fate that could happen if the reserves of Venezuela could be used up. So Guyana's oil exploration. So here we have, again, this is the one of the first drill ship in the Stabroek block in offshore Guyana. And Guyana obviously has emerged as a global leader in oil discoveries. Norway-based intelligence company ranked Guyana against 19 other countries and estimate that Guyana's recoverable resource is over 13 billion barrels of oil. Official figures from the government and ExxonMobil, operator of the largest block with commercial discoveries, place discovered resources at approximately 11 billion barrels of oil equivalent. That's BOE. And this is in January 2025. So that's a pretty current statement based on the situation. So since 2015, when that large discovery was made, if you look at this graph, this was done in November of 2024. Nowhere here from Brazil going up, Saudi Arabia, Suriname, Indonesia, Norway, Namibia, Egypt, Canada, US, Mexico. Guyana is second, only topped by Russia. Nowhere here do we see Venezuela. So we are seeing already that we know that Venezuela is not really having any luck, having their own reserves. So again, this is one of the ascribed motivation for Maduro's stance in trying to seek ownership of that oil-rich part of Guyana. Now we move on to Venezuela. So I will tell you this, when I was putting these slides together, it was so different from creating slides or doing research to create these, like putting together these about Venezuela compared to Caribbean, because the Caribbean, any Caribbean nation, Trinidad or anywhere else, because we always have all these different these empires that lead us and rule us, and we have to switch from one rule to the other, as with Guyana. So Venezuela was refreshing in a way because there was a limited amount of colonization, because it's primarily from Spain. So Venezuela's history features indigenous settlements, European colonization by Spain, a struggle for independence, and a complex modern period marked by oil, wealth, and political instability. And that pretty much sums up where Venezuela starts. stands at this point. So a brief history again of Venezuela. Venezuela, home to the world's largest oil reserves, is a case study in the perils of becoming a petrostate. Since it was discovered in the country in the 1920s, oil has taken Venezuela on an exhilarating but dangerous boom and bust ride, that roller coaster that offers lessons for other resource rich states. And actually, many contemporaries are saying that Guyana needs to be careful about how they handle their oil boom because, like it or not, Venezuela being a petrostate is a good example of what not to do in terms of how you handle your resources and your economy as a petrostate. So I have to go through a little history of Venezuela. So firstly, it began with the Spanish colonial rule, right? So Christopher Columbus, late 1400s, would have visited Venezuela, where we would have met the indigenous peoples. But in 1952, Spanish colonization began, and they kept their colonization. They maintained their colony. There was no taking over by any of the other empires, no Dutch, French, the English, or anything. And in 1749, there was the first rebellion against the Spanish colonial rule. So they were already antsy and they were itching for their independence. Venezuelans in 1810, they took advantage of Napoleon's invasion of Spain and they declared their independence. So this is in 1810. A couple decades after, Venezuela secedes from Gran Colombia. Then, 50 years or so after, ruler Antonio Blanco, he began attracting foreign investment. He began modernizing infrastructure and he developed agriculture and education. In 1809, under dictator Juan Vicente Gomez, Venezuela becomes the world's largest oil exporter. So they were booming as an oil, or you can say it was the start of them becoming a petrostate. And that happened within that, let's say, 25 years. In 1945, a coup established civilian government after decades of military rule. Because remember, Mr. Dictator, he was a dictator. Juan Gomez, he was a dictator. So initially, when Venezuela would have sought their independence, they wanted their independence. But then shortly after, they became controlled through a dictatorship. So now a coup began. And in 1948, President Romulo Gallegos, Venezuela's first democratically elected leader, he was overthrown within 8 months in a military coup led by Marco Perez Jimenez. So Venezuela's history, it's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting when they are basically moving on their own. So I did enjoy going through this and preparing the slides. I will say that. In 1958, Admiral Larrazabal ousts Marco Perez, and then he becomes the president. He won through a Democratic Action Party, and he won the elections. Now, in 1973, so this is closer to our living, existing time, because I was born in 1974, right? So this is within my era. Venezuela benefits from the oil boom, and its currency peaks against the dollar, significantly peaks, and oil and steel industry is nationalized. Then in 1989, Carlos Perez, elected president, launches austerity program with an IMF loan. So economic depression is hitting Venezuela terribly at that time. Riots, martial law, general strikes, hundreds being killed in street violence. So this is 1989. Now, 1992, this is where a very important or a very prominent figure associated with Venezuela, Colonel Hugo Chavez. So he had two coups. He went to jail. They were unsuccessful. He went to jail. He was pardoned. Then when he came out shortly after, President Perez became impeached on corruption charges. And this created a window for Hugo Chavez to rise. And did he rise? So, Venezuela, the rise of Chavez. Hugo Chavez elected president, and he launches the Bolivarian Revolution. He brought in a new constitution. He had a socialist and populist economical ideology. And all these things were being funded by the high oil prices alongside increasingly anti-US foreign policy. So this is where the anti-US ideas began becoming very prominent. So in 2001, he uses an enabling act to pass a law to redistribute land and wealth, and again, trying to concentrate economic and political power. So there was a rebellion in 2004. He took military custody. He was taken into military custody, but shortly after the Pedro Carmona, that government collapses and Hugo Chavez returns to office. President Chavez then signs a decree on land reform to eliminate Venezuela's largest estates and to benefit rural poor ranchers. Again, trying to create a national ownership. In 2006, he created an arms deal with Russia. Now, this is important because in 2006 and 2008, the Russian alliance, there were two big moves there, because Chavez would have created this arms deal and fighter jets and helicopters. So through that, he's having a good force in terms of an invasion or protection from any sort of invasions into his territory. In 2007, he announces key energy and telecommunications companies will be nationalized. Then, in 2007 again, two leading U.S. oil companies, so ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips, they refused to hand over majority control of their operations in the Orinoco Belt to the Venezuelan government, which then expropriates them. So he was giving pressure, he was putting pressure on ExxonMobil to hand over control, but they did not concede. In 2008, this is also important, Venezuela and Russia signs Oil and Gas Corporation Accord, where Russia's warplanes visit Venezuela with Russian warships heading there for November joint exercises. So this is important because Venezuela, through the Russian alliance, is showing that they have additional military support from Russia, who we all know is no big friend of America and the American allies. So in 2009, there was a plan to limit. So we can skip this. Again, so at this point, Venezuela, the economy is declining. The bolivar has devalued significantly. Then in 2013, Chavez dies from cancer, And Mr. Nicolas Maduro, his chosen successor, is elected president by a narrow margin, and the opposition contests the results. Now, any general elections held during the tenure of Maduro, every single one of them has been seen or severe allegations, both locally and internationally. There were serious allegations of corruption. However, those allegations had no impact on Maduro's continued governance. And 2014, further decline again as oil prices dips very low after a 4-year low. 2016, protests to call him out of his presidency. He did not give in. The opposition contests the official victory of Maduro. The UN says 2 million Venezuelans have fled since then abroad to neighboring countries since 2014. And seriously, there are many, many Venezuelans who are still coming into Trinidad. But I will tell you that Trinidad is in such, it's a comedy of errors in Trinidad right now, that people who would have escaped and coming illegally into Trinidad, they are returning to Venezuela because, by comparison, they believe that their circumstances in Venezuela at this time is actually better than what Trinidad has to offer them. So Venezuela de Maduro. So in 2016, hundreds of thousands of people again trying to get him out. Okay, this is a repeat side. Sorry about that. So big step now. 2003. I remember in the news hearing about, on Facebook, hearing about this map that President Maduro had published. And in that map, one of them that was published, I actually saw that Trinidad and Tobago was within the area in which he was saying belonged to Venezuela. So in December 2023, Nicolas Maduro threatened to annex the Essequibo region, and it is about 2/3 of Guyana. And by so doing, he revived a dispute dating back almost 200 years between Venezuela and British Guiana back then. So despite the arbitration that I would have shown you about the area of contention, where the conflict lies, so despite that and the award of most of the lands going to Britain, Venezuela decided that it was going to revive its claim in 1962. Efforts to resolve the issue, including the convention, the Geneva Convention, everything so far has failed. And oil discoveries in 2015 heightened tensions, culminating in Maduro's 2023 ultimatum, although international pressure prevented military action, because he was threatening/promising military action to stake his ownership and claims of the Essequibo region. So at present, we have President of Guyana. Sorry, I'm so accustomed to saying Prime Minister as from Trinidad. So we have Irfaan Ali, we have Nicolas Maduro. And I see this as a battle of wills, a lot of testosterone, ego, but the motives, where do the motives lie? Maduro, having been of Venezuela, having had that legacy of being the wealthiest oil-producing nation, has now been reduced to total economic repair. Whilst Guyana, on the other hand, is being negotiated and navigated quite politely, I would say, through Mr. Ali with their oil boom and the amount of gas, oil and gas reserves that would have been found. And this is, in my opinion, is not going to end anytime soon, right? So let's talk a little bit about this conflict now. So this here is, if you look at a map, oh, sorry about that. So if you look at a map, Venezuela, you have Trinidad and Tobago right here. As I said, oil discoveries, all these little blue dots here, oil discoveries. So this would have been Guyana's, the brown dots would have been the areas that the maritime borders of Guyana, where they would have had their oil reserves. Venezuela in 2003 created their map where they would have gone through there or there, impeach and encroach into this area here and going into there, coming out above Suriname now. And this is the area here, offshore-wise and onshore-wise, that Nicolas Maduro is trying to seek and take control of. So according to Offshore Energy, Venezuela's state-run companies will immediately, this is what was said by President Maduro, state-run companies will immediately proceed to give operating license for the exploration and exploitation of oil, gas, and mines in our Guyana Essequibo, Maduro said. Any other firms operating within the area will have 3 months to withdraw from the territory, and he explained that there will be a zone of integral defense of Guyana Essequibo that they would have to protect, right? So notice oil, gas, and mines, because Guyana is very rich in gold. As a matter of fact, growing up in Trinidad, as a child, straight on into my 30s or so, we would always know within our local jewelry industry here, when you buy gold, anything gold, any jewelry, you would ask, one of the questions that you would ask is the gold from Guyana? Because there was this confidence about the high quality of the Guyanese gold. So Maduro is trying to get his hands on all of that. And this is what he would have extended as, he's trying to just, okay, get away, 3 months. But that was 2023. It's now 2025. And that has not happened yet. Now, the United States under Donald Trump. So we would know that previous to Donald Trump, President Biden, he was a soft president, I would say. He was a soft president, and there was some lifting or relaxation of some sanctions and stuff, I guess, in terms of trying to bring some sort of ease between the relations between Guyana, the United States, and Venezuela. But as of yesterday or 2 days ago, I'll share this video with you. So it's a 2-minute video. So just let's listen.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has lashed out at the U.S. Secretary of State, calling him an imbecile. This after Rubio vowed to respond with force if Venezuela's oil-rich neighbor Guyana was attacked. The long-standing border dispute escalated after Venezuela claimed the region in Guyana as its 24th state, approving a bill last that was rejected internationally. The region, which makes up 2/3 of Guyanese territory, is rich in oil reserves, with ExxonMobil leading offshore exploration efforts, which has rapidly scaled up since 2015, while Guyana insists the border was finalized by an 1899 arbitration panel. Venezuela claims the river to the region's east as a natural border recognized as far back as 1777.
Cooperation
The U.S. Secretary of State, who is on a Caribbean tour, visited Guyana, where he signed an agreement to boost security cooperation with the country, including greater information sharing, taking a dig at Venezuela. He bluntly warned the country against attacking Guyana, vowing to brandish the power of the U.S. military to protect the small South American nation.
The regional threats based on illegitimate territorial claims by a narco-trafficking regime. And I want to be frank, and I've said this during my time as a senator, and I have full confidence in saying it now as the Secretary of State. There will be consequences for adventurism. There will be consequences for aggressive actions. And that's why our partnership in that regard will be.
Meanwhile, asked what the United States would do if Venezuela attacked ExxonMobil oil projects in Guyana, Rubio warned against any adventurism, stating that it would be a very bad week for Maduro.
We have commitments that exist today with Guyana. We want to build on those, expand on those, and we'll leave it for the appropriate time. But suffice it to say that if that regime were to do something such as that, it would be a very bad move. It would be a big mistake for them.
The Guyanese president, meanwhile, welcomed the stance of Rubio, who called Venezuela's claims illegitimate. Listen in.
I am very pleased at the reassurance of the U.S. in ensuring the safeguard of our territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Taking a pot shot at the U.S. Secretary of State, Nicolas Maduro called Rubio an imbecile, stating that no one can threaten Venezuela. Maduro has increasingly pushed his claim to the disputed region controlled by Guyana and was accused early this month of making an incursion.
The imbecile Marco Rubio comes out threatening Venezuela from Guyana. Venezuela can't be threatened by anyone because this is the homeland of the liberators. This is the homeland of Bolivar, imbecile.
To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
All right, so that there was a nice summary, I believe, of the stance being taken by the U.S. under Trump's leadership. You saw the Secretary of State being quite firm in what he was saying. We also heard President Ali expressing his appreciation of the U.S. support. And of course, we heard Maduro's claim of his opinions of both men. Now, the last video I have here, because I'm just about finished, is Maduro would have said he's going to host elections in the Essequibo region. And I'm just going to jump a little bit throughout here for you to have an idea. Now, it's just one person being interviewed, but it is a Guyanese resident. And let's hear a bit what, from the perspective of a resident of the Essequibo region.
This is the Essequibo region in western Guyana, 159,000 square kilometers filled with vast natural resources. It is also subject to a long territorial dispute between Guyana and Venezuela.
Here we refer to
Colin Henry is part of the St. Ignatians Amerindian community. He is concerned about Venezuelan claims over the land.
I firmly believe it belongs to Guyana, right? But after oil would have been discovered, is then you find, to me, is when Venezuela got so interested in trying to occupy the Essequibo, right?
Henry used to live close to the border with Venezuela, but left when the United Kingdom sent a warship to Guyana 2 years ago. The dispute dates back to 1899 when an international tribunal ruled in favor of British Guyana. But in 1962, Venezuela rejected the ruling. Now it wants to take it a step further by including the Essequibo in the upcoming legislative elections.
Guyana appealed to the International Court of Justice for an order to prevent the Venezuelan elections here in the Essequibo. In May, Venezuela says they will elect a governor and 8 legislators from this region. Guyana says this is a violation of their sovereignty.
In the past decade, Guyana began developing its oil industry and has rapidly transformed the country's economy. Much of it happened with investment from the U.S. oil company ExxonMobil. President Nicolás Maduro, a close Russia ally, says the oil is coming from a region that belongs to Venezuela.
The government of Guyana has entered into a spiral of war against Venezuela, and they think they can get away with it. That's why it's completely accurate to call the president of Guyana the Zelensky of the Caribbean. He's a true Zelensky.
Maduro's claims are a concern for many of those living in the Essequibo.
Related to wars, we see how it begins, like in particular Russia and the other areas. We see how it starts, and then we see the escalation. So, of course, we are very much concerned with that.
The ruling by the International Court of Justice is not expected until next year, and while tensions are likely to escalate ahead of the legislative elections in Venezuela, those living here are confident the territory will remain Guyanese. Teresa Bo, Al Jazeera, Essequibo Region, Guyana.
Okay, so that brings me to the end of my sharing of some information about the Guyana-Venezuelan conflict. Based on what I've shared today, and of course your personal knowledges, your insights or so, who do you think will prevail? Will there be anyone prevailing within both parties, or would it be a foreign body who prevails? What are your thoughts, Dr. Adityanji?
First, let me thank you very much indeed, Bindu Maharaj, for a highly informative and educational distinguished lecture. True to the tradition of being a teacher and an educator, you assembled a very good audiovisual presentation. It was extremely helpful, so much full of details, and the way it went over 250 years of history to present time in a short period of time and brought us to what is happening currently, including 2 days ago, the visit of Marco Rubio, U.S. Secretary of State, to the Caribbean region and a statement. So you actually brought us to the contemporary level. Before we take your question and I answer your question, I will take some comments and questions from our audience. I must say that it was one of the most informative lectures I ever heard on this particular topic. So kudos to you, hats off to you.
I blush, thank you.
I am going to invite, we have our resident diplomatic advisor, member of our International Advisory Board, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, here in the audience. Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor was actually in the region. He was Indian ambassador to Chile. So he is very familiar with the South American geopolitics, and Ambassador Kapoor is very closely working with the CSA. So I would like some of his comments before we take comments from the audience. Ambassador Kapoor.
Thank you, Dr. Adityanji. Well, I just want to say one thing, and that is, when you are following a subject and you have some interest in that area, in that field, and it is part of geopolitics, then to come across a presentation where there is so much of more learning, so much of more information, so much of more knowledge is such a great pleasure. And I don't know how to thank Dr. Bindu Maharaj enough because of this way she has presented it so passionately, getting into so much detail, giving so much of understanding to all the listeners about the topic, that now we feel that we know a little bit more than what we knew earlier, and that we are in a position to at least, listen in, or talk or convey the position more accurately. Her blending together of the basic, data initially, and then bringing in a lot of subjective aspects of various viewpoints from various countries in the region was so powerful. It was such a beautiful presentation. Dr. Bindu Maharaj, we just want to thank you very, very profoundly from the CSA. And you put Dr. Adityanji in a spot by asking him that question. Who would prevail or what would be the future scenario? It's not going to be easy, because we are in touch with some of the ambassadors of these countries, including Guyana and Suriname and other countries in Trinidad, Tobago, your country also, in the US. And we do keep on chatting with them. But to understand the ramifications of the granularity of the problems was such a great pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Adityanji. Thank you for this brilliant event.
Okay. Binduji, I'll come back to your question, but before I go to that, I'm going into the chat, and there are only two questions. One question has been answered already. It's from Dr. Shrikant Chopra, and that question was how much support, both diplomatic and security related, Guyana can expect or would be willing to accept from USA. This has already been answered by you, and you played that, video clip from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So that question has been answered. Next question is from Dr. Vineet Singh. He's based in Canada, and Dr. Vineet Singh is my fellow psychiatrist actually, and he's asking you, has Guyana got any long-term strategic plans to expand its military forces? Do you have any information on that?
Well, I would say, firstly, President Ali has had a challenge with the military forces of Guyana because of the historical governance and the previous bodies who would have ruled Guyana over the years. There is no set, like you would say, let's say, loyalty to the post of president and the office of presidency. There was a lot of, I would say, partiality that the Guyanese military would have had. So I think at this point, President Ali is simply, but yet very difficultly, it's quite a challenge, a task for him. It's to get the military on the side of Guyana, which is being led by him, rather than the historical part of it where Guyana was, let's say, I don't want to use too strong words, but I can. So previous, you would have seen that the military, although like Dr. Bharat Jagdeo and now Dr. Irfan Ali, you would have seen that despite being presidents, they did not have the undisputed support of its military forces, because they had alliances to the oppositions of the time who were once in governance. So I think the bigger fight that President Ali has is to ensure that he has confidence and he has corralled, let's say, his military forces to work on behalf of Guyana as a nation rather than anything else.
Incidentally, Dr. Ali was the ambassador here in the US before he became the president. So we had met him on a few occasions.
Right.
Yeah, even before he left for becoming the president. So it was good.
I will add to those comments. So you have a battle between David and Goliath. Venezuela is a large country. 22 million population, of course, more than 2 million. Some people say even 4 or 5 million people have fled from Venezuela. Guyana is relatively smaller country. The entire population is 800,000.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at Venezuelan armed forces, the Bolivarian national military is 125,000 force.
Mm-hmm.
Very much better trained because of the nature of the regime.
Mm-hmm.
And has been involved in domestic suppression and oppression and all that, rigging of elections, and has historically good relations with Russian Federation, and over the last 20 years have purchased a lot of arms, but the economy is in shambles. On the other hand, you have Guyana, which is a smaller country, 800,000 population. The actual armed forces of Guyana are only 5,000. So clearly, if there's a head-to-head confrontation, Guyana will not prevail, and Bolivarian army will run over, if they want to run over entire Guyana. But the situation is not so, black and white. There are other nuances. One of them is the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine, which was propounded by President Monroe of the United States, that United States will not brook any interference with outside powers in the United States sphere of influence in South America. And Guyana can very well invoke Monroe Doctrine and invite US armed forces to bolster the Guyanese defense in case of hostilities. So that is definitely an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Guyana has historical links with the former colonial power Britain, and United Kingdom sent a warship a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So this will not remain a regional conflict if Maduro was to make an adventurous move and send his armed forces to Guyana. Now, what also complicates here is Venezuela has good relations with Russia and, some security considerations. But Russia is totally exhausted with the war in Ukraine. Russia can even, win back its territory in Kursk region. That would be good for Russia. Russia does not have any appetite for, supporting Maduro for conflict. Now, Guyana, although American ExxonMobil and all are involved, but also Guyana has given a license for oil exploration to China, to CNOOC. So there are multiple international players, and it will be more like a chess game rather than, a direct conflict, because Maduro has to be stupid enough to, invade by actual military forces. So he's just building up pressure by the referendum, by publishing the maps, now saying that there will be direct election and he will appoint a, let's say, regional governor of Essequibo. On one hand, you have Maduro, who is known for his corruption, his brutality, and all that sort of thing. President Irfan Ali has also been accused of corruption. There are problems, and as you said, the issue in Guyana is that historically there has been ethnic strife between Afro-Guyanese and Indo-Guyanese and the indigenous people. And traditionally, if you see the armed forces of Guyana, the military forces were dominated by the Afro-Guyanese, who consider themselves as true Guyanese, although they were also brought, by the British colonialists.
Exactly, definitely.
And it's unfortunate that Indo-Guyanese were never allowed to be recruited in police forces or the military forces. So the internal forces of Guyana are in shambles. Now, in next 1 year or next 2 years, this issue is not going to be solved. It has long-term implications. If we are talking about, 1898 arbitration and reopening of that arbitration in 1962, so this is open, to future interventions with the cases under ICJ. ICJ has admonished Venezuela not to take any military action. So the case is under ICJ. Now, if there was a smart president in Guyana, they will try to build up, their armed forces with some strategic planning and get over the past vestiges of ethnic divide and create professional armed forces for Guyana. Although you are a small country, they are a small country, but now it is a rich country. It's a rich country in Latin America. It's a rich country in South American continent. It's a rich country if you take whole of the even Western Hemisphere or, Americas, including Caribbeans. So the GDP per capita GDP for Guyana is now $23,000 US compared to Jamaica, which is like $6,000. So it is a rich country. It is rich in resources. It still is that you need to have a forward-thinking president who can govern the country and who has really not done much in that direction. Yes, United States would be the last resort invoking Monroe Doctrine. But what happens when United States enters one country, that I'm not going to elaborate upon. What will happen to the oil resources, Guyana may lose in the end.
And
there are, of course, other options before Guyana, which Guyana really has not exercised. So in the current international geopolitical scenario, when multipolarity is on the rise, Guyana would be advised actually to have better relationships with a country by name India. And I think their security lies in that, because India can buy their oil directly and without threatening them. And if they were to have a security pact, a strategic treaty or bilateral friendship and mutual defense treaty or something like that, Indian armed forces can train Guyanese armed forces to a professional level, all the branches, whether this is Army or Navy or Air Force, in a very culturally compatible manner. So, unfortunately, Guyana has shied away from doing that. Bindu, you wanted to say something?
Well, no, I wanted to ask you, I wanted to say one thing before I ask you that. One other deterrent for Venezuela's advancing into the Essequibo River is Brazil. So Brazil, they would have to traverse through Brazil. Now, although Brazil at one point had said they would station their armed forces along the borders together with Venezuela, President Lula has a close relationship with the Venezuelan body, but I don't think that that allowance for regional wars in South America would really be encouraged and supported by Brazil. And Brazil is a key entry point into the area.
I think you are right, Bindu, Maharaj. Actually, if you look at the resolutions of CARICOM or Organization of American States, Latin American states and all their statements have actually denounced Venezuelan moves. So there is no popular support regionally as far as Venezuela or its current government or its threat is concerned. Yes, their economy is in shambles. So if your economy is in shambles, you basically covet, you lust for your neighbor's wealth. That is what is happening. And yes, Brazil had activated its armed forces because it shares border with both the countries, actually. They had sent their armed forces, but I don't think Brazil will involve militarily. They will just rely on the diplomatic efforts. But I think somebody has to be suicidal to send armed forces into there. Let me put it this way. Knowing what has happened, that may not happen, but Guyana has to have foresight and build up a series of alliances, not just rely on historical precedents, not just rely on colonial power UK because it's a spent force, not just rely on US because US is involved in so many things. And that's why I had given the suggestion that if Guyanese president is smart, they will build up a strategic mutual defense, friendship treaty with India, and Indian armed forces can actually train their military to professional standards, and that is the key to their protection.
But do you think that there is enough of a foundation or groundwork relationship between India and Guyana?
No.
Well, that's it, because even within the diaspora, there is that detachment that we see as diasporic East Indians between India and us as descendants of indentureship and so on. So I don't know. So and that's what you're saying. So there's not even a solid foundation. So then Mr. Ali has some serious work to do then if he decides to go that way.
I agree with that, but that is a possibility for future. A wise leader has to think about future options for national survival. So that would be the suggestion. But we are running out of time. Thank you very much indeed, Bindu Maharaj, for such an informative lecture. We would like that you come to our platform more often, whether for lectures or for roundtable discussions, depending upon the topic. We really enjoyed your presentation thoroughly. For our viewers, thank you very much indeed. And my thanks to Team CSA, Ritudaman Pachori and Mr. Rajiv Verma. I'm also thankful to Ambassador Kapoor, who is our member of International Advisory Board and works very closely with us. So thank you for your wise comments and wisdom because of your diplomatic experience in South America. Thank you very much indeed. We are trying to finish this program, and till next time, thanks a lot.
Okay, goodbye. Ambassador Kapoor, it's not doctor, it's just Miss, not doctor.
Thank you.
I just had to let you know. Okay, everyone, nice sharing some time with you all.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.